The entire Pokémon storage network, the system every trainer on the planet uses to store living creatures, was built by one guy in a cottage on the beach, and he only finished it after he accidentally fused his own body with a Pokémon mid-test. By the end of this, you'll understand why that detail tells you everything about how this system actually works and why it's way more disturbing than the games ever let on. Okay, so Bill. Bill is the Pokémon nerd who lives on the coast between Cerulean and Vermilion in Kanto, and when you meet him in Gen 1, he's stuck in a Pokémon suit because his teleportation experiment went sideways. You help him reverse it, he says thanks, and gives you a ticket to a cruise ship, and the game moves on like nothing happened. But sit with that for a second. The machine he was testing, the one that merged his DNA with a Pokemon's, is the exact same machine that runs your PC storage. Every single time you open a PC and drop a Pokemon into a box, the game is quietly telling you that the underlying technology literally dissolves living creatures into data. Not a comfortable sleep mode, not a Pokeball waiting room. Data! And here's the part that actually reframes Bill entirely. He tested it on himself first. He didn't throw a random Pidgey in and hope for the best. He stepped in personally because he didn't trust the system enough to risk a Pokemon. So the guy history remembers as that weirdo who turned into a Clefairy is arguably the most ethically responsible scientist in the entire franchise. That's the baseline. The PC isn't a box, it's a biological digitization grid, and its inventor is a man who literally became the first test subject. Now, what actually happens to the Pokemon once they're in there? Because this is where it gets genuinely unsettling. When you deposit a Pokemon into the PC, it stops existing as a physical creature. It's converted into a data packet, compressed, stored, and held in a format the system can read and reassemble later. Some lore entries suggest the Pokemon's consciousness persists during this, aware in some low-level state inside the grid. Others imply there's nothing, just a perfect biological blueprint waiting to be rebuilt. The games never resolve this, which honestly is a choice. Either your Charizard is sitting in digital limbo experiencing something, or it temporarily stops existing entirely and comes back like nothing happened. Every Pokemon you've ever boxed has technically been a zip file. The trade system makes more sense now too. Pokemon can be sent across regions instantly because there's no physical creature to move. It's just a data transfer, existential horror dressed up in pastel menus. Okay, now jump to Generation 3, Hoenn. You open the PC and it says Lynette's PC instead of Bill's PC, and most players just blink and keep going, but lore-wise, this is a significant transition. Lynette is a different engineer, reclusive, apparently anxious, codes constantly, lives alone. And she didn't just reskin the interface, she restructured the data compression at an architectural level, meaning she changed the way living creatures are stored inside the system mid-series. Imagine someone switching the operating system on your phone while your contacts are still inside. That's what Lynette did. For every trainer in Hoenn, quietly, with no fanfare. Same terrifying premise, slightly different blueprint. And it gets more bureaucratic from there, because every major region apparently has a local PC network maintainer. This is a job that exists in the Pokemon world. Someone's career is managing a server grid full of digitized living creatures, scheduling maintenance windows, during which, canonically, the system goes down and you cannot access your Pokemon, and keeping the whole thing running across regions that all need to interoperate seamlessly. There's a maintenance guy whose job is to make sure your Charizard doesn't get lost in the void between server updates. That's a real position in this universe. The fact that global interoperability works at all implies there's some kind of universal standard for creature data formatting, like a biological TCP/IP protocol that every region agreed on. Bureaucratic infrastructure holding the world together, and nobody ever mentions it. Now here's the twist that almost nobody clocks. The items PC and the Pokemon PC are separate systems. Someone at some point deliberately decided that living creatures and inventory items needed different storage protocols. That distinction existing at all implies someone sat down and thought hard about the ethics of storing life versus storing stuff. and concluded these things are categorically different enough to warrant separate architecture, which means storing a potion in the PC is mundane. But storing a Master Ball, a legendary Pokemon's held item, a meteorite, all of that goes into a parallel partition of the same global network, converted to data just like the Pokemon, just filed differently. Your PC is simultaneously a zoo and a warehouse the size of a continent. And the items partition is the half that never gets talked about because it seems less interesting until you realize what's actually in there. And then the system glitches. Missing numbers in Gen 1 is usually written off as a game error, corrupted data that appears as a garbled sprite on the old Rod Coast, but some interpretations frame it as something more specific, a Pokemon-shaped anomaly that exists in the gaps of the storage architecture, not summoned or created, just found in the noise. The system has so much data running through it across so many Pokemon and items and regions that the gaps between entries start producing shapes. Leave a hard drive running long enough and weird files appear. Same energy. The gameplay side of it is even wilder. Missing No famously duplicates whatever's in your 6th item slot, which in-universe would mean the item's PC partition started generating phantom copies of objects. The system didn't just corrupt, it fabricated. And that reframes the whole thing. Bill didn't build a clean, controlled database. He built a living network that produces anomalies it was never designed to produce. The PC isn't just storing things, it's generating things on its own in the spaces where the architecture doesn't quite reach. So step back and look at what this actually is. Not a box, not a database, a parallel dimension of digitized life maintained by a loose network of eccentric engineers in seaside cottages and isolated apartments running on biological protocols that most people never question, glitching in ways that produce new creatures from noise and storing everything from caterpies to meteorites to the held items of literal gods inside the same global partition. Bill got stuck inside his own machine, got unstuck, kept building, and the entire Pokemon world just accepted it and moved on. Every trainer on every route in every region runs their career through this system without a second thought, and the next time you're mid-route and you duck into a Pokemon Center to swap your team, just remember, you are accessing one of the most consequential and least questioned pieces of infrastructure in any fictional universe ever built, and the guy who invented it used himself as the crash test dummy because he thought that was the responsible thing to do.